Doug.
Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally, Doug.
Limu? Is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.
Americans told Washington what they want: lower costs. Yet Brandon Carr's FCC is considering a merger between TV station giants Nexstar and Tegna. If approved, millions of Americans will pay even more to watch TV. They'll pay more to watch the news, entertain their kids, or cheer on their favorite team. Thankfully, President Trump knows what Americans want, and President Trump can stop this. Brandon Carr needs to reject the Nexstar-Tegna merger and protect Americans from higher TV bills. Paid for by Keep It Local Media.
Unfiltered discussions. Unexpected guests. No topic is off limits, from sex and relationships to the human condition, personal anxieties, and so much more. The only talk show of its kind in the world. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Hello, welcome. Happy Tuesday. Is that how you pronounce that word? Probably not. You're going to learn a lot of interesting stuff on tonight's show, and here is some of what we'll cover. Your social media apps, are they kind of a drag to use these days? Well, they aren't broken. They're working exactly as intended. Your feed is getting worse. Ads are everywhere. And yet, quitting an app like Facebook feels impossible. In about 10 minutes' time, we'll speak with author Cory Doctorow, who's going to break down how this happened, how platforms like Facebook were delightful to use, 15 years ago, and why they're now rotten. Then at the beginning of the next hour, it's sober dating. Dating is one of the most awkward things anyone can do. Add no alcohol to the mix, and well, things get a little more complicated. So, tips for how to sober date. That is some of what we'll cover on the show. That is some of what we'll learn. But for now, let's dive in.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Are we living in the golden age of employee monitoring, workplace surveillance? Are employees spying on our every move using our devices? From office Wi-Fi to your work phone, how much power does your boss really have over you right now? Well, that's what we're going to discuss with someone who's recently written an article about this. His name is Tim Paradis. He's a future of work correspondent at Business Insider. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. Great to be here.
So are we at a kind of turning point in workplace surveillance, or does it just feel this way because the tools that employers use are more visible, more people talk about them, and in some ways they're kind of more acceptable right now?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, I think maybe your second point there is where we're at. It certainly is getting a little bit more attention from, at least from the folks that I spoke to. And I also think because, employees have less power than they did just a few years ago, it feels like they just don't have as much room to push back if they really wanted to on this.
Yeah, employees can't say, hey, I'm not going to work at this place that tracks me on my work phone. The frame right now is, I'm happy to have a decent job, so they surveil me. What are you going to do? Is that kind of what people are saying?
That's what I heard from some folks, essentially, who look at this. And they, again, it's nothing new that employers are looking at their employees and monitoring what they're doing. I think that there have been some recent updates at Google and at Microsoft that would allow some of this stuff to happen more easily. Employers would still have to opt in, but a lot of times when we're signing up those, that first day paperwork we do at a job, we're saying we're allowing, we're consenting to the idea that our employers rather are going to monitor us. So it just kind of happens, I think, early on.
I remember at my old job, you had to install some fancy certificate on your personal phone if you wanted your work email to come onto your personal phone, and I just refused to do it, so I didn't have my work email on my personal phone. Is it stuff like that? Like, what kind of technology is being used? What information does the average, large, maybe tech-oriented employer have on me? It's
a great question. So it depends on the device. So if it's a work device, it's all of it, right? Which I guess stands to reason. I think most employees would say, yeah, if you're handing me this phone, I have to assume that you can look at anything that you want to on this. Where it gets a little trickier, and those are some of the tech updates that have gotten a little bit better. So employers have more ability to capture, they say for compliance reasons, some information that's on your work phone. If it's a personal device, yeah, oftentimes, like you said, you have to install some sort of some sort of token or something like that that allows the employer to go on and at least grab the stuff that they would need to prevent data loss or to monitor certain things. One good thing is from someone I spoke to about this that they did say, back in the day was if you're going to have any work information on your phone and the employer needs to decide they need to wipe that either because you're a threat or because you leave the company or something like that, they could wipe the whole phone. It's gotten a lot more surgical to where they can just go and take the things off that pertain to work, which is a good thing. But so they can really, they have fairly wide latitude to look at anything that they need to that pertains to the job.
So what should I not be doing on my work laptop or my work phone? And yes, if you need to answer this question inappropriately, you are welcome to.
Okay, well, as shocking as it may seem, you probably shouldn't be looking at porn or other sensitive things on your work phone. Certainly, and also with the more serious topics, I think that's so obvious to most anyone. But things like be mindful about things like looking at your medical records or other things that you would not have. You wouldn't feel comfortable having an employer take a look at. So just be thoughtful about what you're doing and where.
Here's my hot take. If you're going to send me on work travel across the country, I'm only bringing my work laptop, and I'm going to do whatever I want on business travel on that work laptop, including whatever websites I might use in my spare time, and get your head out of the gutter. That's my hot take. Has anyone ever been fired that you know of for looking at, you're in your hotel room, you've traveled to some small American city to have a work meetup with your coworkers or whatever, you're staying in one of those cruddy hotels, and it's nighttime, you go on your laptop. Has anyone ever been fired for that? I don't know.
That's a really good question. I don't know. I will say that a lot of monitoring happens kind of at in the background, sort of automatically, and then certain things can get flagged. So they might say, hey, this requires more attention. We noticed that David is in some city somewhere that's particularly unexciting for him, so he's spent a lot of time in his hotel room at night and
watching Netflix shows. Come on,
yeah, I know. No, I'm sorry, I apologize. My mind's in the gutter. No, I don't know how much that happens. It just would be. I think most people would think that that's probably ill-advised if from a smell test, common sense test. But but it is smart to remember that these are work devices and that there is a wall there.
Now, are most employees collecting this data and then kind of doing nothing with it, and it's just sitting there, constant pings of whether you're in the office, whether you were online, what websites you were going to, how many minutes you spent in your email app, in your code tools, in your photo editor, if you're a graphic designer? Are they really collecting all this and then maybe not acting on it and just having a huge pile of data? What is actually being collected?
That's a good question. It's my understanding that a lot of this, from the folks I talked to, that a lot of this is passive, as you say, that they just kind of have this stuff humming in the background. And then if there's some sort of tripwire, there's some sort of event, or there's some sort of massive transfer of files, or there's some inappropriate website, or there's somebody who somehow is showing some rogue behavior, or even just something, not nefarious at all, but reports a device lost or whatever else, that they can then take a closer look at that stuff. But from the people that I talked to, that it wasn't like they're sitting there looking at, I'm sure some employers logging every keystroke and looking at that and, for a means of measuring productivity, but it doesn't seem like what most companies are doing, if that's fair.
For someone who's listening thinking, am I being monitored right now? And I don't even know it. Should they be asking their employer questions? Should they be sticking up for themselves? Should they trying to be advocating for more privacy? Is there anything we can do?
Yeah, I talked to a couple folks who said, absolutely, ask questions. It's not unreasonable to just ask what's being collected and what's being done with it, especially if you just want to know, what's in bounds, what's not. I wouldn't imagine that that it would be a problem to go ahead and ask. And that's what folks told me who are experts in this area. And also, frankly, just to get a sense. And even if you say, I'm not going to do something that's wildly off the mark, like looking at inappropriate websites on a work device, I'm going to at least want to know, are they, again, monitoring how many emails I'm sending, or the tone of my Slack messages, or, things like that, or just keystroke monitoring simply.
Are there types of industries where this is more common, like maybe the tech industry or the finance industry? Are there any specific industries where I'm more likely to be monitored? Or if I have a work laptop, I'm likely monitored no matter what I do?
Well, I would say that that's true, that you're likely monitored no matter what you do if you have a work device. What I would say is that there are industries where there's going to be maybe increased monitoring or closer monitoring, and that would be ones where there's a heavy compliance component. So think finance, think medical. You worry about, say, in the U.S., like HIPAA violations, privacy violations around medical information. So those kinds of things, there's likely to be stepped up monitoring, as well as companies that do a lot in, and I'm thinking now of, like, say, consulting firms and things like that. There's a lot of intellectual property where they're going to want to make sure that does not leave the corporate walls, and so therefore they're going to want to make sure that people are not sending stuff around that they shouldn't.
Well, you can read Tim Paradis' article, Welcome to the Golden Age of Employee Monitoring and Business Insider, where he is a future of work correspondent. Tim, I've enjoyed the chat. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Great time.
After the break, we'll discuss how the internet has gotten so bad, why companies like Facebook initially launched products that delighted us, that have morphed into things we don't really want, and yet we have so much difficulty deleting.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan are back in Disney's Freakier Friday, now streaming on Disney+.
We switched bodies.
I am freaking out right now. I think I just peed a little.
It's an absolute riot. And the only movie that can be described as
so much weirder than the last time. What last time?
It's the frequel
You ready?
we've been waiting for.
That absolutely slays.
Disney's Freakier Friday, now streaming on Disney+, rated PG.
The Last Show with David Cooper, where we apply quantum mechanical psychoanalytical astrotherapy to your problems.
Why is the internet getting so much worse? And why do we keep scrolling? Like, you've probably noticed this slow death of the social media feed. For example, 15 years ago, I loved going on Facebook, seeing what people I cared about were discussing. Now, when my feed isn't ads for cats, it's stuff I don't care about. And yet, I keep going back. Our friends are there, our connections are there. Leaving would feel like losing touch. So what's going on? Why is the internet getting so much worse? Well, that's what author Cory Doctorow explains in his recent book, In Shitification, Why Everything Suddenly Got Worse and What to Do About It. So let's get into it. Cory, thank you for joining me on the show.
It's my pleasure.
My first question for you, I was sitting at dinner with my in-laws a few weeks ago, and they somehow mentioned your book, and I mentioned I'd be interviewing you. So my first question is there a way to make me look good in this interview so I don't look bad to my girlfriend's parents?
Well, I think you're doing a bang-up job as it is. And I think also in-laws, if they like you, will like you no matter what you do. And if they don't like you, you could perform very well and they would still say you aren't fit to be putting your filthy hands on our daughter. So,
well, I'm afraid I fit in the second camp, but let's move on.
I see.
I'm just going to say impoopification for broadcasting standards.
Sure.
I'm sure you've walked many people through this, but simply for our listeners who are wondering why the internet sucks these days and haven't read your book, what are the phases of it? And particularly the first one, like where we get products that we love, that are a delight to use, and then somehow they start to suck.
Well, I should introduce with just a little bit of context here. So for 25 years, I've worked for a nonprofit called the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF.org. And we're a digital rights group. And the job of getting people to care about digital rights is really trying to find a way to raise the salience of these very technical, abstract things that are maybe a long way off when they're first emerging. And so that's really a game of coming up with similes and metaphors and framing devices and parables and sometimes funny words. And so I came up with this funny word and the minor license to vulgarity, along with, I flatter myself, a pretty good analysis and a set of policy prescriptions, I think has really struck a chord with people. So there's a part of the hypothesis that I dare not name that is descriptive. It describes how platforms go bad. And in stage one of this three-stage process, platforms find a way to be good to their end users while locking them in. In stage two, because the users now find it difficult to depart because they've been locked in some way, the platform can make things worse for them in order to deliver value that brings in business customers. And those business customers pile in, but they get locked in too, which brings us to stage three, which was when the platform takes away all the value, both from the end users and the business customers, leaving behind a kind of homeopathic residue that's just enough to keep the users locked to the platform and the businesses locked to those users. And everything is harvested and delivered to the shareholders and the investors and the executives. And what's left behind is, a pile of poop.
I get it. I want to talk about this phase one a bit because I have Silicon Valley experience. In my previous career, I worked as an engineer at a big tech company. And especially in the 2010s, there would be all these companies that would just explode. Users would love them and they'd have no idea how to make money. And they wouldn't care. They would get funding because they were just locking users onto their platform by delivering arguably a delightful experience. I'm talking about the early days of Facebook and stuff. Can you give me any examples of big players that started off with sort of useful products?
Well, I think Facebook's a really interesting one. So, Facebook started off as a platform that was just for American college kids. You needed a .edu address to sign up. But when they opened up in 2006 and they tried to bring in the general public, they did have a problem, which is that everyone who could have been using social media had an account on a rival service called MySpace. So they went to those MySpace users and they made this pitch. They were like, look, I know you love your friends here on MySpace, but I don't know if you realize this. MySpace is owned by an evil, crapulent, senescent, immortal Australian vampire billionaire named Rupert Murdoch, who spies on you with every hour that God sends. The last thing anyone should want is to have their social relationships mediated by a billionaire, especially one that spies on you. So I come to Facebook.
So trust me, Mark Zuckerberg is the response?
Trust me, Facebook won't ever spy on you. That was their original privacy policy. Wow. And so we piled in and we got locked in. And other platforms have to do pretty esoteric things to lock you in. If you're Uber, say, you have to get this venture capitalist Masayoshi Son, who runs a venture capital fund called SoftBank, to go and get $31 billion from the Saudi royal family and then give it to Uber so that Uber can lose 41 cents on every dollar they bring in for 13 years, so that all the rival taxi companies go out of business, all the other rideshare companies go out of business. Transit has a lost decade in investment because why would you invest in transit if taxis are that cheap? And then at the end of it, you can double the price of a ride and cut the driver pay in half, which is what Uber's doing now. But if you're Facebook, you don't have to do any of that exotic stuff. You can take advantage of a thing economists call the collective action problem, which you can probably best understand as you love your friends, but they're a pain in the ass. So you got sick people in your group chat, you can't agree on what bar you're going to go in on Friday. So it's going to be really hard for you to leave Facebook, right? Because some of you are on Facebook because that's where the people have the same rare diseases you are hanging out. And some of you are there because you emigrated from another country and that's where you hang out with your family. Some of you meet your customers, your audience there. And some of you just organize the carpool for the Little League there. And so it's really hard. You have to convince all those people to leave. That's the collective action problem. And so Mark Zuckerberg knows that so long as you love your friends more than you hate him, he can turn the screws on you and you'll probably stay.
Interesting.
And that's when we start to get the decline of Facebook.
So in the initial phases, it's really about community building for a company like Facebook. Just get a great community, nothing else matters, and then we can sneak in phase two, is what you're saying?
Sure, but I also want to raise this point here, which is that this is just not about the cupidity of Mark Zuckerberg and his individual personality failings, because there are ways that lock-in can be influenced by policy. And, some of our policies taken in living memory did make it easier for Mark Zuckerberg to do this lock-in. And I think we should blame the policymakers as much as we, if not more, than we blame Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg was working for his investors. When policymakers passed a law called an anti-circumvention law, in the U.S. it's Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998.
Oh boy.
They made it illegal to reverse engineer things and change how they work. And so when Mark Zuckerberg went after those MySpace users, he didn't just say to them, hey, come use Facebook all on your own, wait for your dumb friends to join you while you smugly reread our excellent privacy policy. He said to them, come here and I'll give you a bot. And you give that bot your login and password for MySpace, and I'll send it to MySpace several times a day. It'll scrape everything waiting for you in your MySpace feed and stick it in your Facebook feed, and you can reply to it. But because of the growth of laws like the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, it's illegal to do that now. And if you try to do that to Facebook, they will nuke you until you glow.
The very thing that let them blow up, they would now advocate for laws to make it illegal.
Yeah, when they did it to Rupert Murdoch, that was progress. If you do it to Mark Zuckerberg, that's piracy. Every pirate wants to be an admiral.
All right, well, phase two, this is where you no longer matter on a platform, and it's just the business customers matter.
Yeah.
That's just advertisement.
And publishers.
Okay.
Yeah, advertisers, publishers. Advertisers, they find out that Mark Zuckerberg was lying when he promised not to spy on you. And in fact, now he's offering them for shockingly small amounts of money, exquisitely high fidelity ad targeting. And, he's such a proud craftsman that he's going to pay a whole building full of anti-ad fraud engineers. So if you give him an ad to find a user and show them that ad, he's going to find that user and stuff that ad in that user's face, right? Publishers, they get the same thing. They're like, yeah, we'll show them things that they never asked to see, put excerpts from your website on my website on Facebook, put a link at the bottom to your website, and I'll just cram it into people's eyeballs, right? You get a free traffic funnel. But, once those users are locked in, those business customers, then they can make ads more expensive. They can reduce the policing of ad fraud. They can make publishers put longer and longer excerpts that are more and more substitutive. And eventually you end up with this thing where the ad market is completely corrupt. Procter & Gamble was spending $200 million a year on surveillance ads in 2017. They took it to zero and saw no drop in sales because all those ads were being swallowed up by ad fraud, right? So everyone's getting a raw deal. The stuff in our feed that we want to see has dwindled to a kind of homeopathic residue. And that void is being filled with things that Mark Zuckerberg charges people billions of dollars to stick in the feed. And they all get ripped off. And that's the final stage, right? That's the giant pile of poo.
All right, well, on the grand road to the internet becoming terrible, step 1 is delight the users, step 2 is delight the business customers, and step 3 we're going to chat about after the break here with author Cory Doctorow. Check out his book, In Shitification, Why Everything Suddenly Got Worse and What to Do About It. That's available wherever books are sold. We'll be back with more of Cory in a minute.
Part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
So good, so good, so good.
Score holiday gifts everyone wants for way less at your Nordstrom Rack store. Save on UGG, Nike, Rag & Bone, Vince, Frame, Kurt Geiger London, and more.
Because there's always something new.
I'm giving all the gifts this year with that extra 5% off when I use my Nordstrom credit card. Santa who?
Join the Nordy Club at Nordstrom Rack to unlock our best deals. It's easy. Big gifts, big perks. That's why you rack.
The last show with David Cooper, where we utilize non-linear reverse, inverse, backward thinking protocols. It sounds like this.
We're discussing the very fun road to the internet getting terrible. The steps that happen that make platforms a great joy to use for you, the customer. Then for number 2, the business. And then 3, I guess we're about to find out. Cory Doctorow's book, In Shitification, Why Everything Suddenly Got Worse and What to Do About It, outlines this whole thing. And we are here with Cory. Cory, welcome back to the program.
Sure. Nice to be back on.
So how am I doing? I told my in-laws, well, my girlfriend's parents, that you'd be on the show. They're going to be listening to this. How am I coming off? I got to ask.
I think you seem like a stand-up fella, and you've got a good head on your shoulders.
Oh, well, thank you. Hopefully my ex-wife's parents aren't listening, but that's a conversation for another day. Okay, step 1, get as many customers on your platform as possible by giving them a great experience, creating community for them in some cases. Facebook's a great example, the early days of it. Then number 2, develop a rich platform for businesses to come on, maybe advertise in the example of Facebook. That's where we're at in this story of the internet getting terrible. What happens after that?
So, as I said, the value starts to get clawed back. Advertisers are being charged more. They're being subjected to more fraud. Publishers have to put longer and longer, more and more substitutive excerpts from their website. Eventually, it's just got to be the whole article if you want it to be shown even to your subscribers, much less recommended to someone. And, woe betide the publisher that adds a link back to their own website, because Facebook starts to deprecate anything that links off platform, claiming that they're defending people from malicious links. And so now the only way to monetize your publisher content is through that entirely rigged ad market. And so this is the equilibrium that they like, right? All the value's been withdrawn. It can be divided up among executives and shareholders, and there's just enough value left behind that we stay locked in. But the problem for them is that this is a very brittle equilibrium, right? You get one like live stream mass shooting, one Cambridge Analytica scandal, users bolt for the exits, the shareholders start to wonder if this is the beginning of the end, the stock price takes a beating, and the company panics. Although, being technical people, they have a technical term for panicking. They call it pivoting. And so one day, Mark Zuckerberg arises from his sarcophagus and he says, "Hearken unto me, brothers and sisters, for I've had a vision. I know that I told you that your future would consist of arguing with your most racist uncle using this primitive text interface that I invented in my dorm room to non-consensually rate the bangability of Harvard undergraduates. But actually, I'm going to transform you and everyone you love into a legless, sexless, low-polygon, heavily surveilled cartoon character so that I can imprison you in a satirical 25-year-old dystopian cyberpunk novel that I call the metaverse." Right? And that is the final final stage.
All right, that's where we're at. You know, this tactic that they use, vendor lock-in, for me, that's just a fancy word for monopoly. And didn't we break up monopolies like 100 years ago? Didn't governments and regulators step in with a little something called the Antitrust Act way back when to try to prevent this behavior?
Yeah, there's a bunch of these really important antitrust laws, the Sherman Act, the Clayton Act, the Federal Trade Commission Act, the Robertson-Patman Act, and so on and so on. And the problem is that we just stopped enforcing them. And this is a thing that I'm really at great pains to elucidate in the book when I explain why this is happening now. Because, you know, if you listen to what we might call the neoliberal economists, the apologists for this stuff, they'll say, oh, the reason we have monopolies that have captured their regulators and tamed their workforce and use IP law to stop people from making new products that could make their products better and siphon off their customers. The reason for all of this is like the great forces of history at work. It's the iron laws of economics. It's not because, you know, the economists in the 1970s said that monopolies were efficient and we shouldn't enforce antitrust law. But, you know, I got to say, this is not a hard whodunit to solve. These are policies taken in living memory by named individuals. They sit around polishing their fake Nobel Prizes, collecting six-figure consulting gigs for companies trying to do anti-competitive mergers, and resisting all attempts to blame them, right? It's like we used to not have a rat problem because we were putting down rat poison. We started listening to these guys who said the rat poison wasn't necessary. 40 years later, rats are eating our faces off. And they're like, why are you blaming me? Clearly, we are living in the time of the rat. You know, I think it's sunspots that made rats more fecund than at any time in human history. And yeah, it's true. The rats did buy the rat poison factories and shut them down. But look, we are not using rat poison. Shutting down the rat poison factories is an economically rational course of action. And so if we can recover the kind of deliberately obscured history of the policies that were taken that had this foreseeable outcome, then rather than being prisoners of history, we can actually be its masters. We can stop listening to these heads. We can do things that are different from the stuff they've told us to do for 40 years. We are really in the we've done nothing and we're all out of ideas phase of dealing with the internet. And maybe we could have a new good internet that captures, you know, the wonder of the old good internet when it was super fun and, you know, we're having a nice time, and the ease of use of the Web 2.0 era when these platforms came along and made it easy for our normie friends to join us there.
So there's two things I want to extract from this. One, you're arguing what I'm hearing, and don't let me put words in your mouth. This is mostly a political failure, not like a tech CEO or tech company direction. They're just taking advantage of the climate. I mean, they're partly to blame for the bad behavior, but it really is the environment that lets them behave that way.
Yeah, you know, look, I'm not going to say that these aren't terrible people. They're clearly very bad people, but they're also just filling a niche, right? We have policymakers who created what you might call the enshitogenic policy environment, right? So it doesn't really matter who's sitting in the CEO suite. It's always going to be someone who does this. You know, if Elon Musk like pops his clogs from too much ketamine tonight, there'll be a succession battle from like 12 horrible big balls, and whoever emerges victorious will be indistinguishable from him. Because those are the characteristics that succeed in the environment the policymakers set. And frankly, you know, Musk and Zuckerberg, as much as they're terrible people who should be remembered as a stain on the human race, they work for their investors, not you and me. Whereas the policymakers who made it so that when they did the worst things they could think of, they would make more money than God, those policymakers work for us.
Ostensibly, they were working for you and me, yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing is, are we remembering the internet here? Are you remembering the internet here with rose-colored glasses? Like, was it really good 15, 20 years ago? I actually think it was, but what made it so much of a better place?
So I think what made it better back then, and I think it was better too, I'm an old line technology guy. My dad was a computer scientist, and we had like primitive modems in the kitchen in the mid-70s.
Primitive modems and primitive modems. That's a weird kitchen experience.
Indeed. This is before the computer at home had a screen, when it was just a printer and a keyboard. Like that's how far back I go.
Wow.
You know, I thought it was great then, and what I thought more than that it was always good was that when it went bad, it got better, right? It failed gracefully, right? If someone made a product that was terrible, someone would make a new product that kind of plugged into it and got you free of it, the way Mark Zuckerberg did to all those users stuck on MySpace. He wasn't wrong. MySpace's virtue was the people that were your friends there, and its defect was the management of Rupert Murdoch. And so Mark Zuckerberg made it possible to eat the cake and have it too, where you could stay in touch with the friends who are still on MySpace after you left for Facebook. And so you could unshackle yourself from that bad management and have a good experience. So all we need to do is recover a world in which when people are mean to us with their platforms, that we can punish them because they have to face competitors and regulators, an empowered workforce, maybe tech workers in a union who don't have to rely on the scarcity that used to benefit them.
Oh man, as a former tech employee, I love what you're saying. Even though these people are well paid,
sure,
a union could cause them to be able to actually argue for a better world, for these companies to behave better.
Well, look, tech workers used to think that they were temporarily embarrassed founders and not workers. And so they didn't consolidate the power that they had from scarcity with solidarity, but with unionization. And now that the scarcity has gone away, right? 500,000 tech layoffs in the last 3 years, that power has gone away too. And you say they're well paid, but we know how tech bosses treat the workers they're not afraid of, right? Amazon programmers get to show up for work with a pink mohawk and facial piercings and a black t-shirt that says things their boss doesn't understand but makes them feel bad, right? But like people in an Amazon warehouse injured at 3 times the national rate. People who drive an Amazon van pee in a bottle. And there is nothing about writing code for Amazon that says that you can't have a pee bottle next to the terminal, just like there's nothing about being a coder for Apple that says that you can't end up working in an environment that needs a suicide net like the factory where they make the iPhones in China.
Well, I left the industry in 2021 when things were still really good. So just, take what I say with a grain of salt.
Back in the free massages and kombucha days.
Exactly. That's my image of this industry. And then my mother described my transition into media as a day where I decided I hated money. But Cory, that's a conversation for another day. Thanks for sharing details of this process of your book. I appreciate you coming on the show, Cory.
Thanks, David. It was my pleasure.
Cory Doctorow is an author, and do check out his book, In Shitification, Why Everything Suddenly Got Worse and What to Do About It, available wherever books are sold. Coming up next, we'll take a look at social media that doesn't make it look so bad. It doesn't always ruin relationships, but the way we use it might. When you're authentic, like you're real and you share things about it online, that can attract real connection. But if you over-polish your online persona, that can turn people off. This, according to a new research paper, we'll discuss in a few moments.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
At Sierra, discover joyous deals on great gifts for everyone on your list. Like cozy slippers, ski gear, fishing poles, bikes, large kayaks, even larger canoes. Whew, which might lead to another discovery. Wrapping gifts is the only sport you need to stay fit this season. 'Tis the season to discover great gifts at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
We work hard to strike the right amount of intelligence and ignorance. The last show with David Cooper.
Is social media actually pushing us apart, making us lonelier, more anxious, more competitive with each other? Or are we just using it wrong? Well, new psychology research reveals how to use online sharing to build closeness with other people and also how to use it to push people away. So let's chat about this with someone who's done research in this area. She's a psychology researcher at the University of Southampton in the UK, and her name is Carmen Surariu. Carmen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David, for having me.
So let's flip the usual negative script about social media. The common question that's asked is, how is it being used to harm us? Instead, I want to ask you, how do we use social media to help us to get good results out of it?
Okay, so our recent research, a systematic review, just showed that social media can fulfill the purpose that it was built for, so for creating and developing relationships. What we looked at specifically was posting behaviors and the forms that these take. So we looked at things such as self-disclosure, self-presentation, and a lot of other post features that might come up, such as like positivity or intimacy of the information that someone might share. So self-disclosure is this behavior that, if used gradually in relationships, it can help us develop these relationships and interactions with others. And it just refers to us sharing personal facts about ourselves with others.
So in a way, it's like being real, posting real things about your life, not being a phony baloney, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Very similar to that, but not exactly the same, is self-presentation. And this behavior is basically sharing information, but in a managed way. You're trying to manage the impressions that others will make about you. So you can still share the true information, but you might just cherry pick the positive things that could help those people think you're really cool or really nice.
And so what do you find when people share like that on, I don't know, Facebook, TikTok, these kinds of platforms? How do participants or how do people feel when they make posts like that?
So I think generally, if they self-disclose, that's usually associated with positive outcomes. So they feel closer to others, they feel like they make new friends, but they also feel more popular and they feel like they receive validation and support from their networks. With self-presentation, that one is a trickier one. I think people do like to see positive information about us, but I think there's a line that if we cross that line, they might perceive us as fake. They might trust us less, things like that. So I think it's fine to self-present. It's fine to tell people about your achievements. But I think once they perceive that you brag too much, they might like you less. They might trust you less. In summary.
I think at the root here is feeling authentic, using these platforms in a way that feels authentic to your friends or your followers or the people that look at your profiles.
Yeah, exactly.
How do I do that but also not seem like someone who's kind of fake or inauthentic?
I think there's always a balance of things that you could do. I think speaking about positive content that you could share, that is the one that would get you most likes, for examples. But however, when you do feel like you need to be authentic, it's okay to share the negative things. Sometimes it's just a manner of being appropriate while you are online. If people will perceive that your content is inappropriate or even too intimate, if we go back to the self-disclosure stuff, they will still find you less likable. I think what we should do usually is keep the very personal stuff, very negative stuff for our private conversations, even if those happen online, and then use the posting side of things to share more positively, I guess.
Are over airbrushed photos, like photos where I look absolutely perfect, maybe I've had a lot of makeup that day or done a lot of work in Photoshop to make it look great, or super polished writing, do those come off as inauthentic?
Yeah, we do find that, especially for things like excessive use of filters or, for example, highlighting very, let's say, luxurious experiences that people have. Again, if you just do that every once in a while, I'm sure no one would mind. But if it's something that happens on a regular basis, I think people would be bothered by it in a way. It's not necessarily that they dislike you as a person for doing those things. I think the way we interpret it sometimes is that it makes them engage in a sort of social comparison that makes them feel worse about themselves. So it's not necessarily you doing those things that bothers them, it's just how it makes them feel.
What are some of the motives that people have for posting online, for engaging with social media platforms?
Oh, I think there's a variety of motives. So it could be just that you want to keep in touch with your friends or your family, perhaps if you live far away from them. It could be meeting people who are similar to you, maybe people who you share similar hobbies with. Or it could just be wanting to feel validated. So, for example, you do something new, like you publish some research and you share that online so that people provide you with validation that what you did is really interesting and cool.
Now, suppose I post about struggling with depression or grief and loss or mental health stuff, like really vulnerable private stuff, stuff that may not actually get too many likes, but might get, I don't know, private support.
Yeah.
Is that sort of posting behavior? Do people get rewarding results from that?
I guess we wouldn't know for sure, but I think you can still get some rewards. So what we find is that indeed, like you said, you get fewer likes for these things, but people will still pay attention. And a lot of the times, those who are closest to you will reach out to you privately. And also, there's a thing that we must consider in terms of how close you are to your audience. So for, let's say, close family members or close friends, they won't be bothered by this difference between sharing positive stuff and negative stuff. For them, they will still like you. When this does become important is for people who are more distant friends or more distant acquaintances, because they would perceive the very negative content as inappropriate. Let's make just like as a short word.
Is there something to be said for social media, like amplifying our personality? For example, I have a friend who's very warm. He's a therapist, and his posts online are always, I don't know, so supportive and uplifting. I have another friend who, I don't want to throw around labels, but he's a bit narcissistic, and his posts are always kind of showing off. Can social media just sort of amplify our personality traits? Is there any truth to that?
To be honest, I don't have an answer to that. I think it would be something worth exploring. But I do think that social media is a place that does encourage self-expression. So whether you do that in accordance to yourself or you choose to maybe tone it down, I guess it's up to you.
If someone listening wanted a takeaway from your research into social media, what would you recommend to them? Post more, post less, post more authentically? What would you recommend?
I think it's a good thing to post more in a way. I wouldn't say my advice would be to post 10 times per day or something like that. But if you feel like you're getting benefits from it, audiences of posts, they do like to see more information on someone's profile because they feel like they get to know that person. They become more familiar to that person, and getting to know them and seeing perhaps similarities with the person that is posting is encouraging them to interact with that person and to like them more.
Carmen Surariu is a psychology researcher at the University of Southampton in the UK. Carmen, thanks for talking to me about your research. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, we discuss one of the most awkward and painful things anyone can do, dating. Except if you remove alcohol from the mix, sober dating, it becomes all the much more challenging. Tips for dating without the drink in a minute.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Coca-Cola. For the big, for the small, the short, and the tall. Peacemakers, risk takers. For the optimists, pessimists. For long-distance love. For introverts and extroverts. The thinkers and the doers. For old friends and new. Coca-Cola. For everyone. Pick up some Coca-Cola at a store near you.
Smart, sharp, and slightly unhinged. Late night's fresh perspective. The last show with David Cooper.
Dating is awkward, painfully awkward. Now, try it sober. No drinks, no chemical courage. And that's when, at least for me, the panic sets in. So let's discuss the reality of sober dating here with addictions and counseling expert at Chorus, Yonah Budd, who can be found at yonahbudd.com. Yonah, welcome to the show.
Hey, David. Great to be here. How are you?
I am well. I want to talk about dating on hard mode. Or maybe it's just clearer mode. Maybe it's clarity. Maybe dating without booze is a more clear way to do it. It just, with clarity in dating becomes, I don't know, pain, discomfort, existential dread. It's my greatest fear, I got to say.
Well, fortunately, you don't have to because you're in a meaningful relationship.
Committed, meaningful, loving relationship. But she could leave me at any minute, Yonah. We all know that.
I'm surprised she has it. But
me too.
Another question.
Every day is a miracle, but that's a conversation for my therapist.
So for anybody who's dating, with or without alcohol or booze or drugs or whatever, anybody who's dating, there's a great level of anxiety to meeting somebody new. I mean, all of us, we're going to start a new job, go to a new school, meet a new person, have a new roommate. There's a level of natural anxiety, kind of excitement and a little bit of fear. And so alcohol for many people, drugs for many people, make that go away, and they claim to be more fluid, more easy to have a conversation, but it's not them doing the talking. It's the drugged out, inebriated, medicated version doing having the conversation.
I'll say it doesn't make that pain go away. It just numbs it until the next day. And then you got to wake up and confront the fact that you went through something painful and you forced yourself to do it, and your behavior might have been a little bit off. But that maybe is a conversation for a little bit later in our chat here. For me, it's like not even worth it dating. It's so uncomfortable. It's so stressful. I have stomach issues, so I got to eat like white rice for 3 days before I go on a date. You know, I just remember dating being so exhausting when I have been single. There have been periods where Miranda's walked out on me. Well, we've broken up and then I'm single for a month or two. It's like the least fun thing in the world for me. And I can't be alone here that the pain of dating is almost makes it not worth it.
Yeah, for tons of people. And what the real difficulty is when you try to, ease the pain, numb the pain, which is a really good term that you used. The reality is at some point, if this date turns into more dates, and let's say it's a breakfast date, or she sleeps over, or he sleeps over, or they sleep over, you get up in the morning, what do? Have a drink in the shower so that you're that inebriated version? Sooner or later, they're going to see the real you. And I think the best thing is to come out of the block just like that and maybe talk about how this is uncomfortable. Hey, I'm really happy that we're here together, but I got to tell you, I'm a little nervous. I'm not embarrassed to say, being vulnerable on a date, being a little bit sensitive on a date, especially for guys, is kind of a cool thing. I find that the patients and clients that I talk to, and my experiences with my own 3 boys that are now married and in relationships, but in their dating days, I always found that if you show a little bit of vulnerability and a little bit of honesty in your emotions, it tends to be more attractive to the kind of person you probably want to be with versus someone who's going to be turned off by that. And I say, get the check and go home.
This speaks well to a dating advice that I give. I'm not sure it's good advice, but my advice is be full on. Be your most uncomfortable, awkward, vulnerable, weird self. And yes, you're going to scare more people away that way, but the people you don't scare away will know you well, and they'll be people you want to date. Unfortunately, when you scare away 10 out of 10 people, maybe being full on isn't great advice. But rewinding the strategy, rewinding before the approach, even going on the date. I remember being on the apps like 10 years ago. And what do you say to someone who you're chatting up? You say, let's grab a drink. That is how you meet people. At least that's the default setting for meeting strangers. Let's grab a drink at a bar, at the bar at a restaurant. Flipping that script can be a little bit hard. Like changing it to let's grab a coffee, I don't know, seems more weird and intimate to me. You have to do it. But it takes courage to flip that script or to move away from alcohol when you're suggesting the first activity.
I think, great point. Clearly, that becomes, in my mind, the first positive filter. So I suggest to everyone that I talk to, and I talk to tons of people constantly about, now I'm sober. What do I do when I'm, want to go on a date or whatever? So, first of all, you have high anxiety. Exercise is a great way to get through the anxiety. Push-ups, sit-ups, go for a long walk. Have a nice hot shower. There's lots of ways to get around that anxiety. We can maybe talk about that another time. But the strategy of, hey, why don't we meet for a coffee and go for a walk, or why don't we go skating if you're in a place that has ice, if you're in a nicer, warmer environment on the West Coast or other parts of North America. There are lots of places you can go and walk outside. Talking about going for a coffee and a walk, or go for a hot chocolate, or let's go get an ice cream, or let's, and the reason being is I want to get to know you. And I find that, the restaurant and bar environment is so noisy and so distracting that I'm not really going to get the best benefit of getting to meet you. I say flip that into a positive discussion. Set yourself up for being in a situation where you can actually get to know each other. And frankly, going for a walk and having a coffee or a hot chocolate while you're chatting, I think becomes much more intimate than meeting in a bar or restaurant.
And if someone suggests, hey, let's do an escape room together, they're immediately, that's
Yeah.
someone you don't want to date.
Yeah, let's go crack a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
I like this notion of a positive filter. Like, sure, if you ask someone for a coffee versus a drink, if they think you're weird, that might kind of feel bad, that rejection. Oh, I would only prefer to go for a drink. These other activities you suggested are weird. But you're actually just filtering someone who is likely to inject a lot of alcohol use into the dating process. That might not be someone you want to date. And so stop looking at rejections as a bad thing and start looking at them as potentially positive filters. If you know the person you're dating is going to need alcohol to get there with you.
Exactly. Like, I mean, we live in a day and age now where you can pretty much, if you're confident enough to deal with the fact that you only want to be with people that you really want to be with. And if you're putting yourself in an environment like, oh my gosh, I've got to go out and, I'm not really drinking, so I'm going to have to order like a fake drink or just a soda water. And she's going to ask questions. He's going to ask questions. They're going to ask questions. I don't really want to get into that discussion. I say if you're on an app and you're chatting and you're texting and all of the stuff we do on apps, people do on apps today, those dating apps in particular, it's a great opportunity to filter out the stuff that you want right off the top. And if you have to, swipe left, go next, and keep moving through, kind of have your own, I suggest to people that you have your own filter list that you use with everybody. And, there's 10 key things, right? So not being in an environment where alcohol is being served might be one of them. Getting some, indication of, how they respond to in an empathetic way to the fact that maybe you're not drinking or not using anymore. If you even share that you might have a problem. And for those of us that, may not have alcohol or other forms of dependency problems, just using those, couple of shots of tequila or a couple of joints just for courage, make those go away and let, part of your filtering process has to be matched to you being who you are. And like you said, you might, some people scare 10 out of 10. Maybe you have to rethink your own profile. But, for every nut, there's a squirrel, right? So sooner or later, you're going to find a connection that works.
I suppose you're right, but if someone follows all the advice we're giving, it's all fine and well. They filter out people that they want to avoid and then find themselves lonely with nobody. There's still got to be some advice for them, which is what I want to talk to you after the break. But also, okay, for all the downsides of sober dating, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, it's weird, it's nerve-wracking. There are benefits.
Huge.
And one amazing benefit is you will notice red flags way faster. So when we come back, we'll talk about what happens when you're lonely following this advice. And one benefit of sober dating, red flags become red rather than rose-colored. I'm here with Yonah Budd, an addictions and counseling expert with Chorus. We're talking sober dating. You can find Yonah Budd at yonahbudd.com. More on this after the break.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
Meet the computer you can talk to. With Copilot on Windows, working, creating, and collaborating is as easy as talking. Got writer's block? Share your screen with Copilot Vision to help spark inspiration, and use Copilot Voice to have a conversation and brainstorm ideas. Or maybe you need some tech help. With Copilot Vision, Copilot sees what you see. Let Copilot talk you through step-by-step guidance so you can master new apps, games, and skills faster. Try now at windows.com/Copilot.
Prepare to have your mind blown as we delve into the complexities of relationships, explore the cutting edge of science, and celebrate the bizarre and beautiful absurdity of the world around us. This is The Last Show with David Cooper.
Dating can be awkward. Add alcohol and it becomes a little less awkward maybe, or at least it feels that way, but not all of us can handle alcohol. Many of us are sober, avoid it for reasonable choices. I myself do not drink because I have a problem with booze. By the way, I'm 6.5 years sober. Congratulations, me.
Mazel
I'm here
tov.
with, what's that?
Mazel tov.
Okay, well, I haven't introduced you yet, Yonah Budd at yonahbudd.com, addictions and counseling expert with Chorus. All right, Yonah. Before the break, we were talking about all the downsides of dating while being on booze, all the downsides of dating while being sober. It can be awkward. It can be uncomfortable. Booze can avoid these things, or at least make it feel like you're avoiding these things. But there's one really good benefit I've found about dating without booze or drugs, and that you actually see red flags. You're much more willing to excuse bad behavior on a date if you're sloshed. What do they say? When you're wearing rose-colored glasses, all red flags are just flags. Booze can be rose-colored glasses, can't it?
Oh, yeah, 1,000%. And it could be pills. It can be other things. Doesn't just have to be booze, but booze is the more natural one in that setting for sure. Yeah, I mean, what it does for every shot or two we take, we end up with a veil over our eyes, so to speak, and that veil just compounds itself with more and more alcohol or more substances to the point where you're not seeing clearly, and and not seeing clearly can lead to all kinds of really uncomfortable situations down the road or throughout the evening or throughout the date. And one of those real downsides, I can tell you straight up, is when people drink too much or are too high, they say stuff they don't really want to. And it's like, oops, did I really say that last night? Or did I really do that last night? So if one is anxious about going into a date and assume that alcohol is going to be the cure-all to make it that much easier, the reality is when that booze wears off, you have to deal with what was left behind.
And if you don't add booze to the mix, you would have seen these bad behaviors in the first place.
1,000%. You don't see anything you don't want to see.
There's got to be a class of people that is listening to us and thinking, okay, that's all fine and well. I'm going to, avoid people, avoid out situations with alcohol. For example, drinking is a problem in my life. I'm sober. I have all this great advice that I follow and find myself avoiding drinking as I follow this advice. But one thing that happens is it can be kind of lonely. And there's got to be people who end up writing off 10 out of 10 dating candidates because alcohol would be involved. And then they find themselves alone. What advice would you have for someone who is willing to listen to all these things we're saying, but then finds himself having no one to date?
Put sober in your profile.
Yeah.
So that your connection right off the top are people that dig it and get it. Right. So if you don't put it in your profile, then you're going to match. See, I think it's a question of who we're trying to match with. And I think when we're honest with ourselves, are we really looking for the person that looks like they're a 10 out of 10, or would we be happier with a more empathetic, kind, understanding, interesting person that's maybe a 7 or 8 out of 10, even if those calculations even count. I find them obnoxious to begin with, but
you brought them up.
Well, but that's how unfortunately the dating world functions, right? Everybody is categorizing people based on usually the outside, not the inside, because that's what you see when you match, right? So I think it's a function of looking at who you're trying to match with, so that if you're losing 10 out of 10, you're probably fishing in the wrong pond. And maybe one of the ways of getting into the right pond is setting yourself up for success right out of the gate by setting up a profile that says not drinking now, or sober, or however the categories work in those apps. And I'm been married for not way too long. I've been married for a very long time, so I'm not, fortunate enough or unfortunate either way to use those apps, but I do help others. There are categories where you can change the profile, which will identify you as sober and ready to meet. And that should help you fish in a pond that you may catch more than lose.
When I first quit drinking, someone I knew who's not a friend now, wasn't a great friend, but they did accuse me of being less fun, being more boring. Not drinking, not using can feel more boring. Now, I think on the flip side of that, you end up being more present, more sharp, able to go deeper. Like, there's benefits you get, but it might be less fun on the surface, less crazy. You for example, you're less uninhibited when you're sober. To someone who has that fear that if they remove drinking from dating, they'll be more boring, what would you say to them?
Start getting involved in activities.
Be less boring yourself so you don't need alcohol to be the interesting thing.
Well, you be less boring and do stuff where it doesn't just rely on you to carry the room. So go bowling or go axe throwing or go to something where the activity can kind of carry some of the flow until you get more comfortable.
Just don't say escape room is all I'm saying, Yonah.
No, definitely. Nothing with maybe axe throwing isn't a good idea.
Unless an escape room company is the sponsor of this show, in which case that escape room is great and I recommend you go there. Otherwise, I hate them.
Right. I think you have to make the experience more exciting. I think we put too much on ourselves to rely on the one-to-one exchange and have to make that like special. I think the specialness should come from the activity together, from what you share, and slowly you start to open up with one another and you become more interesting to each other, and try to find out more about what the other solution, the other strategy is. Try to find out more about the person that you're dating and try to find some information and interest in what they're interested in. And come to the table with some of that. Hey, I found that you were interested in, in 14th century art. So I kind of Googled some of that and did some chat GPTing and stuff's pretty cool. I found one painting I really liked. So try to find a connection. I know it's really...
No, you can't be going on a date and saying, here's your interest. I went on chat GPT. Let's talk about it. No, Yonah, you're bad at dating. Don't do that. Bad advice. But the sentiment of what you're saying, be an interested, engaged person I agree with.
But if you're talking to somebody, you find out their likes and dislikes, right? If you're chatting with them before the date, you're texting with them before the date, try to be interested in what they're interested in, I guess is my point.
Don't ask ChatGPT to be interested in it for you, is what I'm saying. Can dating someone who still drinks, if you are not, is that a deal breaker? Is it doable? I mean, for example, my girlfriend Miranda she doesn't have a drinking problem, but she drinks, and we have a lot of understanding and navigation around it and boundaries and all that. It works for us, but entering the dating scene, maybe it doesn't work as well. Is it doable? Any advice there?
I think that if you're potentially dating somebody who drinks but will not drink around you, might work. But if you're out somewhere and they're having a drink and you're not, and, I think that that's an unnecessary trigger for someone who's trying to stay sober. It depends on the level of how many years sober and how easily it is for them to maintain. But I think it's an unnecessary trigger. And I know a lot of folks, I've had a lot of experience with people who have relapsed as a result of kissing somebody that tasted like alcohol.
Yeah. That's one of our boundaries. No smooching after you've been drinking. To her credit, I sobered up while we were 5 years into a relationship. So it's not,
Yeah, fair enough. No, I get it, but you make it work, right? My wife doesn't eat meat, I eat meat. So we figure out a way to, have meals together that work. Compromise, right? But in the early stages of the relationship, the early stages of dating, I think it's really imperative that you're open, like you said from the onset. Being transparent, being open, being real is the only way that the dating scene will work for you longer term. Otherwise, you're going to live a lie, date to date to date, and that creates more anxiety, frankly, than going on the date itself.
Well, you can find Yonah Budd at yonahbudd.com. He's an addictions and counseling expert with Chorus. Yonah, what a joy it was having you on the show today.
That's great, David. David, I really appreciate being here and love to meet your missus sometime because she must be something very special.
She must be special to put up with me. Let's be honest here. But yeah, maybe sometime. Yonah, thanks again.
A pleasure, David. See you soon.
I'll take a moment to remind you of the Last Show podcast, where you can listen to interviews on this show that you loved, listen to entire nights you missed, and more. Go to www.lastshow.pizza, our website. That's .pizza, not .com, for more details. And once you find it, subscribe. Coming up next, when you hear one of your favorite songs, the color of the light in the room may change how it hits. That's right, the light collaborates with the music playing in a room to change the way it makes you feel. Details from a new study on this in a minute.
Want to be part of The Last Show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644.
I am so excited for this spa day. Candles lit, music on, hot tub warm and ready. And then my chronic hives come back. Again, in the middle of my spa day. What a wet blanket. Looks like another spell of itchy red skin. If you have chronic spontaneous urticaria, or CSU, there is a different treatment option. Hives during my next spa day? Not if I can help it. Learn more at treatmyhives.com.
The Last Show with David Cooper. Procrastinate your life away with us.
Does the visual vibe when you're listening to music change how you perceive it? I'm talking about lighting here. It turns out that lighting, the brightness and environment around you, may change how songs make you feel. I am here with human building interaction researcher at Clemson University, Jason Yeom, who has worked on this. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And lighting technology researcher at UC Davis, who's also worked on this research, Jae-Young Suk. Jay, welcome to the program.
Thank you for inviting us.
I imagine before this study, lighting and the way it makes us feel had been studied, and music and how that makes us feel had been researched. But why bring these two things together? Why investigate how these two things together make us feel?
I think I can answer for that question. So before I moved to Clemson, I was working at Arizona State University, and then it belonged to the design school. And then we also had a neighbor school of music. And as a human building interaction researcher, I've known that lighting already has a significant impact about our emotions, stress release, and so on. So that was one of the main factor, how indoor lighting environment affect people. But then also the music itself has a similar impact on people. So there's been a music therapy on the PTSD, people with the PTSD, and then also there's a psychological impact has been studied a lot. So yeah, one day I was just in a multidisciplinary research seminar, and then one faculty introduced about the impact of music on the people's stress release. So I thought, oh, maybe what if we combine these together, and then does one dominate the other, or would it create a synergistic impact? So that was the start of this study, and then I applied for a small research grant, and then I got it. So we start collaborating together.
So let's go into the findings. How does lighting change people's emotional response to maybe the same piece of music listened to in two different lighting environments?
It was really interesting that lighting color and then the color temperature of lighting make actually a significant impact on human, the music listening experience. We studied two different types of music, like happy music and sad music, and then conducted a human subject study to understand how different colors of light actually influence different types of music. And then we actually found that warm white color, like the yellowish warm tone of the light, actually makes a very good impact on happy music listening experience. So that was really big finding for us.
So different light temperatures, different colors affect how we perceive different kinds of music. Happy, sad. What do you think is actually going on with our brains or with our perception to make it enhance music like that?
So when we actually selected this specific piece of music, so in the School of Music, there was another faculty who collaborated with us, and she gave us the 10 music pieces as known as a sad music. It's been studied and then tagged as a sad music. And then also gave another 10 music as a happy music. And then that's been already known that when people listen this type of piece of music, then majority of their emotional responses are sad or happy. So that was already a starting point. What we were wondering was, in addition to those, if we change the light to red or the warm light or the white light or the blue color, then would it stimulate and then elevate the emotional responses further, or actually take it down, so that, for example, like you're listening to happy music in an upbeat so that you're feeling about it, but then in a wrong lighting, then it kind of kills the mood. Would it happen, or would it doesn't really matter? So that was the point that we were really curious about. And then the findings that we found actually verified some of our original idea, and then some was a little surprising that we found because we didn't expect.
Now, can lighting override our emotional intent? Like if I listen to a happy piece of music in sad evoking lighting, can it change the way I feel, or will it really just amplify or de-amplify what's already there, the way I already feel based on music?
I think lighting can be like a supporting role instead of like reversing the human experience. One thing I wanted to add also to Jason's answer is there are so many lighting technologies already available on the market. You probably saw color changing LED lighting system, which actually responds to different music,
sure,
different game. And then people actually use those different lighting properties at home and then at different applications. The thing is, people actually don't really understand how to really utilize those technologies to improve their experience. So I believe that this first study actually proved, there's a significant relations in between lighting and then human experience. And then now we can actually dig into more to understand, how to really maximize and optimize the experience.
Well, let's talk about that, the maximizing experience. How might your research change the way we design concert halls or nightclubs, or I guess the lighting inside of them?
I was a lighting designer before for more than 10 years. And then I also worked on some lighting system design in auditorium and then performance hall. And the introduction of the color changing LED, it happened more than like 10 years ago. And, we are still using those technologies because the technology was evolving. We were able to set different color, different intensity, different effect, dynamic effect, because the available technology. But again, we didn't have enough scientific evidence to really guide designers or the director, curators to understand how to utilize different colors of light in those applications. So now I think in the future, those designers and then, like exhibition set designers, curators, they will be able to connect the dots in between the human experience and then the available lighting technology, and then start to understand and then start to utilize the technology in their own purposes.
One really interesting potential use for this is a healthcare setting, where people don't want to be upset because of lighting. They want to be in an optimistic mood when they're getting healthcare treatment. Is that a potential use for some of your findings, to how to light hospitals in a certain way?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a future direction that both of us are actually aiming for, and they're looking for some research opportunity. So the lighting itself already has been studied that it has a significant impact, especially for the cognitive performances. So the people with the dementia or people with a mild cognitive impairment, there has been the light therapy. It's been implemented, and also in the psychological impact, like to calm them down, or the relaxation therapy or something like that. So music also has been in the same way. So that what if we combine this together so that we can maximize the healing process? So that's one of the interesting aspects that we are very much interested in, and then also looking forward to jump into it.
It is a really cool use of this. And also like TV show makers, filmmakers, they could use color and light color to sort of amplify depressing scenes in a show or really happy scenes in a show.
Yeah, as Jay briefly mentioned, it's already in the market. So imagine that you go to the theater and then you're watching, say, like Lion King, and then there's this dramatic scene, but then there will be some light changes with the red or blue, but then there's no really fundamental scientific understanding what this color stimulates emotion in our mind. They just do it in terms of the design aspect, not a psychological aspect. So what if we combine those two factors together? I think there will be much more interesting show, or the music, or any other thing. So yeah, that's very interesting thing that we would love to happen.
I think so too. Jason, thank you for sharing your findings with us. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting us.
And Jay, thanks for being here as well.
Thank you very much.
Jason Yeom is a human building interaction researcher at Clemson University, and Jae Young-suk is a lighting technology researcher at UC Davis. Coming up after the break, singlehood. When you're romantically alone, it's not something that feels the same your whole life. It's a journey that has phases for different age groups, and we'll tell you what those are in a minute.
Want to be part of the last show with David Cooper? Call us and join the conversation. 1-888-505-6644. Day is done. We're just getting started. The last show with David Cooper.
Singlehood, being a bachelor or a bachelorette, isn't a fixed state for one's life, but a shifting journey that can be shaped by age and your identity and other factors. Some long-term singles struggle while others adapt and thrive. We're going to talk about why with someone who's done research in this area. She's a PhD researcher in sociology at the University of Antwerp in Belgium, and her name is Elise Etun. Elise, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Couples shift a lot in their lives. There's the honeymoon phase. If they're going to get married, there's the phase before they get married, after, kids, old age. They go through all these phases in life. So it shouldn't be surprising to us that people who are single go through phases too. But I think often we think of singles as this static thing, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. It's also something we're looking at in our research is like the singleton trajectory. And instead of just thinking about singles as people who are single for the rest of their life or just right now, the singleton trajectory looks at it as periods of singlehood alternating with periods of a relationship. So it's definitely different phases we can go through and not something that is like set or static.
So what are some of the phases that folks who are single, whether for a long time or between relationships, like you say, what are some of the phases we go through?
Yeah, things we see nowadays is things like situationships or friends with benefits. It's not like straightforward having a relationship and being single. There are all these different kind of types of relationships that people experiment with and see what suits them best. And then eventually they might make the choice to settle down and be in a romantic relationship with someone. Or they might say, hey, I'm not ready, and that's fine as well.
So on to the study, you didn't just do like a one small sample set. You looked at a huge amount of data, a longitudinal approach, as it said. What do you think you were able to uncover looking at many studies that would have been maybe invisible in a one-time survey?
Well, what we did was look at people who were single for at least 9 years. And we looked at how their satisfaction with singlehood evolved because we were mostly interested. Did it change? Did it remain the same? Was there some kind of acceptance over these 9 years? So something we kind of expected going into the study was that like this stereotype or the stigma, the longer you are single, the less satisfied you are with being single. And at first it started out like that. But when looking at different contexts, like for example, bringing in age, we noticed that it wasn't that straightforward, and that it does matter who you are and in which phase you are in your life, whether you're satisfied with the single status or not.
One thing I found interesting was one's desire for a relationship. So suppose I'm single for a long time or have long periods of singlehood, but I have this strong desire to be in a relationship versus someone who just doesn't. That's a predictor in how satisfied someone is with their life. I guess that's not surprising, but it's interesting to actually get the data to prove it. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, exactly. It's associated like people who are who indicated they have a desire or they want to be in a relationship. We noticed that they are significantly less satisfied with being single than those who indicated that they did not desire such relationship. So we also looked at it across the years over time, whether if desire remains, whether your single with satisfaction changed like over time. That was something that wasn't significant. So it's not that you can say the longer someone indicates of having a desire, like being kind of desperate, you could say. We expected that to really have an influence on your singlet satisfaction. Unfortunately, we found no significant results on that, like in either way. But it is important to notice that having a desire really relates to having less satisfaction with being single.
Interesting. Do people sometimes adapt in old age, though? For example, I expected in my life to be coupled up. I'm not. I find myself a little bit older. Am I likely to adapt, or am I likely still to be unsatisfied as a single person?
Yeah, that's something we saw in people of older age, that we expect them to adapt because, well, in older age, you might have the acceptance towards your single status. You might have the feeling, okay, I don't have these life stages or life tasks I need to fulfill. For example, like in middle age, we see people wanting to settle down, start a family. So there's this thing of a biological clock, which kind of disappears in older age. And also, like with the companies, this exception is having a lot of friends and family, for example, that buffer the lack of having a partner. So the needs to have someone romantic in your life kind of fades away. I'm not saying it disappears completely, but it might be buffered in some way.
Interesting. Was there any difference, however small, in the genders between people who identified as men, women? Was that something that you saw?
Like a very clear difference between men and women overall, no, unfortunately. But what we did see was with men and women who indicated to have desire, that over time, women had a steeper decline in their singlehood satisfaction, where men more or less remained stable.
Interesting. Now, people who have this idea that they have singlehood identity, like someone who's happy being single, who says they don't want to be in a relationship, who wants to structure their life alone, how do they fit into your survey or your findings?
Well, I think that's a really interesting group to look at. These are people who, indicating to have no desire to be pleased with life the way it is. Maybe they don't feel pressure from the outside world, like looking at people in your environment, seeing how they are coupled with people, or maybe just focusing on yourself, developments, a career or jobs, or school, education. So yeah, of course, these people exist too, and it's not like they don't matter at all. It's just something that is more rising nowadays, but not as prevalent as like the overarching idea of wanting to be in a couple.
Maybe you didn't cover this, but you could speculate. Do people in that group generally identify as happy, fulfilled throughout their lives, or not?
Well, that's something we didn't look at it in detail, but we did see that those indicating not wanting or desiring a relationship were happy with being single. Like a next step that would be very interesting to look at is whether life satisfaction also, or how life satisfaction correlates with this singlehood satisfaction. But for now, we know that they are more or less fine with being single. Yeah.
Well, Elise Hoen is a PhD researcher in sociology at the University of Antwerp in Belgium. Elise, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your research with me. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
That's a wrap on the show. Here are some admin things I want to cover before we head off. 1, science questions. If you've got a general science question, we'll answer it on this show. Don't worry, it'll be an expert answering it, not me. Call us at 1-888-505-6644. That's 1-888-505-6644 and record your question as a voicemail. No question too stupid to be asked. In fact, we prefer stupid questions. You might ask something like this. Do fish know they're wet, or do they just think they're dry and we're even more dry? Okay, maybe that question was too stupid, but you get the point. The number 1-888-505-6644. Call, record your science question. We'll answer it on the show. The other admin thing is our podcast. If you search David Cooper Last Show in your favorite podcast app, we'll pop right up and you can subscribe. So please do that. I am David Cooper, and this was never the first show. We'll be back tomorrow night.
My name is Jordan, and I'd like to invite you to join me on The Canadian Gothic, a podcast covering stories of Canadian crime, mystery, and the offbeat. The Canadian Gothic blends the spirit of late-night talk radio with the depth of a documentary film and applies that approach to both developing stories and historical cases. So if you're drawn to the dark, mysterious, and offbeat, search for and subscribe to The Canadian Gothic wherever you find podcasts.
You were listening to Canadian Gothic.